Hey folks, thanks for joining us today. This is Oregon Tilth with our part 3 of our 4-part webinar series on strengthening organic enforcement. We're glad you could be with us today. So we actually have one more coming up in our series next month. Stay tuned for that. But today we got some great topics: organic fraud prevention, which is on everyone's mind, hopefully, supply chain traceability, and non-retail labels. So grab a vessel of your favorite liquid and sit back for some casual discussion, hopefully some fun. Today we have an outstanding crew of people with us: Josephine, Dobbs, and Mann, who leads our orange team at Oregon Tilth. We have Morgan Kelley, one of our technical wizards, or specialists is the technical term, as well as our other technical specialist, Lindsey Campbell, here. So this is a heavy hitter group of folks. Also, we have our client experience specialist, Franklin Smith, my better half, and I'm Levi Fredrickson, your applicant experience specialist. So if need be, folks, we've got that out of the way. I do have a copy of the rule here so we can refer to it. So, I mean, if something comes up, I read this almost every night and we can refer closely to the rule here. Let's see. Does anyone remember what? Oh, wait. I got the humor out of the way early, folks. That was our humor because we're supposed to have a little humor to make the webinar fun. So we're done with that because what I'm about to say could not be more serious, okay? We, as your friends, are encouraging you, please apply sooner rather than later if you are exempt up to this point, but because of SOE need to get certified. So please reach out to us sooner rather than later. We have capacity to serve only so many people. We're not, I'll be honest, we're not overwhelmed at this point, but there is an upper limit because in fairness to our current clients, we want to take good care of them, provide excellent customer service. So we want to be able to have capacity to serve our current clients as well as you new folks. So at some point, Oregon Tilth may have to stop accepting applications. We don't know when that will be, but that may come. So just friendly encouragement to consider applying sooner than later. And if you're already certified, you might think this doesn't apply to you, but there might be people in your supply chain that you depend on for getting ingredients or processing aids or something like that. So reach out to them. We so want you to get them certified that we'll give you $100 credit for each entity you bring to Oregon Tilth and get certified as part of your supply chain. We'll talk more about that, or you can reach out to us so you can get a hold of my team and kind of figure out which route to go. All right, thanks for listening to that. It's just really friendly encouragement to apply sooner than later, folks, for those of you that need to get certified. With that public service announcement out of the way, let's jump into our very first topic at the front of everyone's mind, which is organic fraud prevention. So I know, Franklin, you've got a burning question you've been waiting to ask Morgan all week. Go for it.
I do, yes, and thank you for the intro, Levi, and thank you for that friendly PSA. Super appreciative. So yeah, just to kick things off, Morgan, organic fraud prevention. So we know that preventing fraud in our organic food systems is a really huge cornerstone of the NOP's focus. Can you just tell us a little bit more about what is currently required of operations in this realm?
Yeah, you bet. So organic fraud prevention has always been a goal in the organic regulation and of certification programs. This has been done with labeling regulations, operations documenting organic practices and record keeping, inspections to verify those organic practices, and random testing. So while fraud prevention measures have always existed, they haven't been foolproof. And this is because operations and supply chains have become more complex as the organic market has expanded over the years, which has caused an opening for fraudulent activities to happen.
Thank you, Morgan. So that begs the ever important follow-up question. What is changing with fraud prevention and this new SOE regulation?
So those existing fraud prevention measures that I just mentioned will be enhanced. There will be some additional requirements for both operations and certifiers to address any gaps or vulnerabilities in the organic supply chain. So SOE is designed to enhance the organic integrity of products and prevent fraud within the organic industry. The new regulations can have several impacts on clients involved in the organic supply chain, and these include increased documentation requirements. Operations will need to maintain more comprehensive records of organic transactions, certificates, relevant documentation, and specifically, records will need to be maintained that span the time of purchase or acquisition through production, all the way to sale or transport. Records will need to be maintained that trace back to the last certified operation in an operations supply chain. And lastly, all agricultural products will be required to be identified as organic on all audit trail documentation. There will also be some enhanced verification processes. This could include more rigorous inspections and possibly audits and verifications of organic practices at different stages of the supply chain. There is also a need for improved transparency. Certified operations will need to provide more detailed information about their suppliers, ingredients, handling practices, and any non-organic materials they might use. All of this will lead to stronger consumer confidence in the organic market. Operations that successfully comply with the regulations could benefit from increased trust, credibility in the marketplace, and potentially leading to improved sales and market opportunities. Surprisingly, organic fraud wasn't explicitly defined in the regulation before. Though under SOE, we now have a codified definition for organic fraud, which is the deceptive representation, sale, or labeling of non-organic agricultural products or ingredients as 100% organic, or made with organic. So also with organic fraud now being defined in the regulation, all operations will be required to specifically state their fraud prevention plans in their OSPs.
Thank you, Morgan. That was quite a lot of great explanation there and definitely a lot to digest. Super helpful. But so the next follow-up question is, so with all that in mind, what are some examples of fraud prevention practices that an operation might include in their organic system plan going forward?
So fraud prevention practices will look very different depending on the type of operation you are. So for example, what might be a risk area for a dairy that grows their own feed is entirely different from a dairy who's importing livestock feed from across the globe. There would be higher risk with imported grains, and those operations would need to state their plans for addressing those high-risk areas in their supply chain. In the SOE Federal Register, the NOPs provided a helpful list of possible fraud prevention measures, and these include a flowchart or an inventory list of the operations supply chain that identifies its suppliers, identifying the critical control points in an operations supply chain that have a higher risk of fraud occurring, or where there's a higher possibility of a product losing organic status. A vulnerability assessment to identify weaknesses in an operation's practices and supply chains. Outlining the practices that will be used to verify organic status of products that an operation will acquire or use. Having an outlined process to verify suppliers and minimize supplier risk to organic integrity. Detailing what mitigation steps an operation would use to limit or correct vulnerable areas and minimize risk. Ensuring that there are stated monitoring practices and verification tools to assess the effectiveness of those mitigation measures, or outlining a process for reporting suspected organic fraud to certifying agents and the NOP. There are also external organic fraud prevention programs that an operation might want to opt into.
So that's awesome, Morgan. There's a lot there. I bet our audience here today would really appreciate some applied examples, with all that in mind. Like, how does this impact our clients or prospective clients? What new actions do they actually need to take?
So this is broken into two parts. So what is expected of organic certified operations, and then what's expected of organic certifiers, both of which will impact clients. For operations, they're going to need to assess where those potential risks for fraud are in their supply chain, and then implement mitigation strategies in some way. Operations should start assessing those risk factors now and begin to think about what they can do to close those gaps and minimize risk. Operations that have complex supply chains that use several intermediaries, for example, will likely have more risk than operations that bring very little on site and have few direct suppliers and buyers. So in conjunction with that, in conjunction with the operations fraud prevention plans, certifiers will need to assess the risk of operations they certify and evaluate the effectiveness of those fraud prevention strategies that are outlined in the OSPs. So as mentioned earlier, some high risk factors to consider could be the number of intermediaries used in your supply chain, the use of imported organic goods, or the use of an exempt uncertified broker. And risk assessments and risk factors can be fairly dynamic. And this is important to remember because we have to respond to the marketplace. So specific practices or goods that may have been considered high risk one year due to identified fraudulent activities. In those high risk areas, additional certifier oversight activities may be required, such as full supply chain traceability audits, targeted sampling maybe, or additional inspections. So some folks may remember when conventional corn and soy imported from the Black Sea region was being fraudulently labeled as organic. At that time, these commodities from this region were considered to be high risk and additional oversight was needed. And as those fraud prevention measures were taken, the risk decreased. This means it works. The systems that were implemented to reduce that risk worked to reduce organic fraud.
Thank you, Morgan. That's an incredibly important topic and like really useful and helpful explanation there. And I think that's actually a perfect segue to our next topic, which is supply chain traceability. So with that in mind, just want to move on over to Josephine and wonder if you could just kick things off by giving us just a pretty brief overview of supply chain traceability and how it works with the NOP.
Thanks, Franklin. Just as Morgan was highlighting with fraud prevention, supply chain traceability is one aspect that can be employed to reduce fraud. These two pieces of the SOE regulation are clearly intertwined. So some of the information that I will be explaining will overlap with Morgan's. There are two parts to supply chain traceability under SOE. First of all, certified operations will have additional requirements in record keeping to increase their supply chain traceability. This will continue to be verified at inspections. And the second part is that certifiers will need to conduct risk-based supply chain traceability audits of products that they certify to verify compliance. This may include collaboration and cooperation with other certifiers, and they will need to maintain procedures for identifying high-risk operations.
So how exactly is this different from past regulations on supply chain traceability?
Well, Franklin, in the past, while recommendations and best practices were provided to assist organic operations in establishing and maintaining traceability throughout their supply chains, it was not explicitly defined within the regulatory framework. However, the SOE rule aims to strengthen organic enforcement and ensure the integrity of organic products by introducing new measures. One such measure is the explicit definition of supply chain traceability under Section 205.2. A supply chain traceability audit is now defined as the process of identifying and tracking the movement, sale, custody, handling, and organic status of a certified product along a supply chain to verify the organic product's compliance. As we can see, organic integrity depends on oversight and transparency across the entire organic supply chain, including some operations that may never physically contact organic products. The rule requires certification of high-risk operations such as importers, traders, and others that facilitate the sale of organic products. Although these operations may not physically contact organic products, they control critical events along organic supply chains, where organic integrity can be compromised, including purchase, sale, transport, storage, and combining or splitting products.
Thank you, Josephine. That's super helpful and really great clarification and good to keep in mind. So just to transition a little bit, can you provide us with some more detail on how the SOE rule changes and enhances the descriptions of products and just general monitoring practices overall?
Thanks, Franklin. I'd love to. The inclusion of supply chain traceability in the SOE rule brings much needed clarity to the organic industry. Previously, traceability was explained under Section 205, 103B, which required certified operations to fully disclose all activities and transactions in sufficient detail. However, the new rule provides a specific definition and requirements for supply chain traceability. Under the new rule, there is a greater emphasis on providing detailed descriptions of organic products. This means that certified operations need to disclose more information about their products to ensure transparency and facilitate auditing. This requirement can be found in Section 205, 103B. 205, 103 was also updated to outline that the records required to be maintained in order to be audited must now span the time of purchase or acquisition through production to sale or transport and be traceable back to the last certified operation. Now, this has always been the case. However, the NOP has simply clarified those required records in more detail.
Got it. Thanks, Josephine. So, I mean, this sounds good. This sounds like a positive development in terms of deepening consumer trust and preventing fraud, which we can all get behind. But let's talk a bit about these monitoring practices. Like, how has the SOE rule actually expanded on our monitoring practices?
Thanks, Levi. It really is a positive change. The SOE rule, specifically Section 205, 201A3, provides a more comprehensive description of monitoring practices and procedures. This includes the frequency with which these practices will be performed to verify the effective implementation of the client's organic system plan. Also, this increased level of detail helps ensure that organic operations are actively monitoring and maintaining the integrity. In addition, audit trail documentation must identify certified products as organic. In the past, some operations that only handled or produced organic products may not have had that identifier on their records, since there wasn't a requirement to make that distinction. That's changing now. Regardless of the operation type, all certified products will have to have that organic identifier on their records. This will include audit trail documentation for agricultural products handled or produced by a certified operation and identify organic products on these records as 100% organic, organic, or made with organic. So, for example, in the past, the sale of organic beef cattle documentation might have included a bill of lading listing the commodity sold as beef cattle. It will now be required to include the identifier organic on any bill of lading or shipping documentation for organic products sold. So it will now need to be listed as organic beef cattle.
Okay. That was awesome. A really good applied example, Josephine. I mean, we appreciate you illuminating on that. Love us some illumination. But those applied cases, I keep going back to this from earlier, are, I think, really helpful for our audience here. So can we delve into some more real world examples and, illustrate how these regulations actually impact our clients in the organic food industry?
Certainly. Let's consider an organic importer as an example. Under the new SOE rule, importers are classified as high-risk operations due to their crucial role in the supply chain. As a result, importers will now be required to obtain certification and maintain detailed records of their transactions, including the traceability of organic products from their source to the point of import.
that definitely is a significant change for importers. So any importers out there, make sure you listen to this one again. Are there any other examples, Josephine, that you could share to just highlight how these regulations would impact our clients?
Absolutely. Let's consider an organic broker who operates as an intermediary between organic producers and buyers, but never physically handles the products. In the past, these brokers were not required to be certified. But even though the broker doesn't physically touch the product, they do play a critical role in the supply chain. Under the new regulations, organic brokers, like other high-risk operations, will be required to obtain organic certification. And in addition to certification, brokers will need to maintain comprehensive records of their transactions and provide traceability documentation. These records should cover the entire supply chain. This could involve conducting due diligence on the certifications of their suppliers, confirming the organic integrity of the products that they are brokering, and ensuring that all relevant documentation is in order. By maintaining transparency and accountability throughout the supply chain, we can foster consumer trust and support sustainable growth of the organic industry.
Amen to that. Yes. And
Yes.
thank you so much, Josephine. That's really great topic and so much incredible information there. So really appreciate all of the illumination. I think this is also just a good time to do a friendly plug PSA for 2 of our previous webinars on SOE that we did. Webinar 1, where we just go a little deeper into previously exempt operations, and then webinar 2, where we discuss the new transaction certificates and just how these will be issued through the Organic Integrity Database. So if you haven't yet, check those out. And now this is the perfect time to go on to our last topic of the webinar, the labeling of non-retail containers with Lindsey. So Lindsey, could you just tell us currently what is required in this realm?
Well, Franklin, currently only a lot number is required on non-retail containers.
Short and sweet. All right. So now with SOE, what changes?
Well, before I answer that question, I'd like to take a step back and think about the requirements for the retail labels, which include identifying the product as organic, an ingredient statement where organic ingredients must be declared as organic, and then below the handler statement, there must be a certified organic by Oregon Tilth or OTCO or a similar statement, which we call the COB statement. So for non-retail containers, it is not required to include a handler statement or a COB statement, which has historically created a gap in supply chain traceability. And this updated part of the regulation is filling in that gap by requiring operators to clearly identify products as organic at all stages of the supply chain. The new requirements under SOE are described in Section 205-307, and they state that non-retail containers used to ship or store organic products must be labeled, and the label must identify contents as organic, as well as include a lot number or another identifier that connects the product to audit trail documentation. Where previously the label would only be required to say lot number 1234, it must now say organic black beans, lot number 1234. This connects to supply chain traceability, where both the label itself and the traceability documents are going to require the product to be identified as organic.
Awesome, Lindsey. You know what I'm going to ask, though. Sorry to sound like a broken record, but I know everyone wants to know, how does this impact our clients? Like, what actions do they need to take here?
Well, in the immediate future, operations do not need to do anything. We're currently working on updating our OSP documents and our labeling guides and also our website to clearly communicate the updated requirements, which will include a timeline for getting new labels submitted for review and approval. When we have completed the updates on our end, we'll then request operators to submit non-retail labels that either need to be updated or also ones that maybe weren't on file previously, but now we do need those.
Very good, very good. So last follow-up question then. Could you just give us a couple real-life examples of how these new regulations are going to play out? I mean, it's just always really good to see, how these changes work in the real world and just outside of the regulation theory.
Yes, absolutely, Franklin. The most common question that we've been asked regarding this topic is whether or not hard-to-label containers used for storage or shipment must now be labeled. The answer is yes. All containers used for storage or shipment must be labeled as organic and include a lot number. This includes produce boxes, totes, harvest crates and bins, trailers, tankers, rail cars, shipping containers, grain elevators, silos, or other methods of bulk transport or storage. That seemed like an excessive list, but we just want to make sure that everybody understands all of the possible ways this could impact you. The next question we're asked is then, how am I supposed to label a tanker or a silo? They're often strange shapes, sizes, or made of materials where it's hard to apply a label. And this is where we're going to step back and say there's a lot of context within the preamble, including comments and responses directly from the NOP. We really encourage people to read through these to get a better feel for what is changing and the questions that have already been asked and answered from the NOP. Included in the preamble, the NOP allows for operations to use temporary labels or signage to meet the requirements of 205, 307, and they also allow abbreviations or acronyms to identify products as organic, provided that they are clear and easily understood. These kind of options provide additional flexibility for containers that may be difficult to label due to size, shape, material, or other factors. The important thing to take away is that all containers used for storage and shipment must be clearly identify the product as organic, as well as include a lot number or other identifier linking it to the audit trail documents. The audit trail documents will then also identify the product as organic, and then trace back exercises performed at inspection will follow the product back to the last certified operation. The combination of reducing the quantity of exempt operations, along with requiring labels and audit trail documents to identify products as organic, will actually simplify the process while enhancing the integrity of organic products and prevent fraud within the organic industry.
Wow. Thank you, Lindsey. That's a lot to digest, folks. I know you sitting here in our webinar today probably have to go rewatch it, perhaps. I will be rewatching it several times. This whole thing can feel like a bit of a circus, I understand, or a SOCUS, rather. SOCUS. Okay, humor aside, like we said earlier, we really want the best for y'all. We want you to remain compliant. So last time I'll say, please do apply sooner than later if you need to be certified. And if there's people in your supply chain, you get a $100 credit. We're full support. Please help them to get certified. You can direct them to get certified at tilth.org. So you can get a hold of Franklin and I. We'll be super happy to help you. And just know it's not me and Franklin fumbling in the dark up there. We've got the backing of Lindsey. We've got the backing of Morgan, Josephine, and a ton of other team members that are highly versed in this stuff, as you've seen today. So any question you have, we are glad to field it. We want to help you through this and remain compliant, so please reach out. You can also, if you just have general questions, reach out to organic@tilth.org, and our administrative team will forward it to the appropriate parties. But probably a lot of the questions you have, especially as a new applicant, can go to getcertified@tilth.org. We take care of you from there. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks everyone at Oregon Tilth for sharing your knowledge. That was a lot that was dropped. And we look forward to seeing you at our fourth and final one next month in July. So stay tuned.